The Great Gospel of John, revealed from the Lord through the inner word to Jacob Lorber. Volume 2, Chapter 147 to 149. The Rising Sun of Jesus Christ in the Heart of Man. Chapter 147. The two Essenes say, "Now we too believe that this Nazarene is more than just a most perfect human. He is indeed physically like none of us, but in his inner parts and heart dwells the fullness of divine strength and power that is obeyed throughout infinity. But now let us direct our attention to the sunrise, as commanded by him, in order to behold wonders." Says Peter, "Whether a wonder is going to be seen precisely is hard to tell, but the way the red-rimmed little clouds on the distant horizon proclaim it, we shall experience upon this height the most beautiful play of God's creation, and therefrom obtain instruction on how a similar sunrise has come to our soul, lasting forever." Says one of the Essenes, "Indeed, a sunrise not only for us, but the entire earth and even the entire infinity, because it seems to us that this incarnation of the highest God Spirit is meant not only for this earth and its beings, but for all of infinity. It is, of course, somewhat unfathomable for our spirit as to why the Divine Spirit has chosen this earth in particular, since he has, as we now know it, countless myriads of splendidly huge light worlds, where he could have undertaken his incarnation, but he will know best why he chose this earth in particular. When we previously still thought that this earth was the only world in the entire universe, the thing would have been quite easy to grasp, for then there would have by the nature of things been nothing other. This earth, according to our concepts, was the only endlessly great world whose waters reached to the firmament, and we believed that the sun, moon and stars were the only ones to light up this world with their light. But now, suddenly, everything has assumed a different aspect. We now know what all the stars, moon and sun are, and know how small our Earth is in comparison to a solar Earth. Now it could of course be asked and said, how did this grain of sand called Earth come by such grace? Of a truth, this question shall once be a portentous one yet, and intensely offensive to many. Hence it would, in our opinion, not be entirely superficial to receive proper clarification on this point. But you think, can we ask him? Says Peter, "Try it in your heart. If an answer comes, then well and good. But if not, then it means that we are not yet sufficiently mature for such instruction. But now look, the sun is about to rise, for the tiny morning clouds shine almost too brightly for beholding." Says the Essene, "Of a truth, this is an indescribably glorious sight. But don't you notice something moving above these clouds? It seems like brilliant stars moving about. What could this be?" Says Peter, "What it is, only the Lord shall know. But we fishermen call such not too rare phenomenon little morning fish. When these appear, then it is good to fish in the water, and towards evening there is certain to be inclement weather, or at best a strong wind. Although I must admit to not having seen fish of such freshness and liveliness, this manifestation is not unfamiliar to me, although it is probably easier to make out from this height than from the depth below." Says the Essene, "You know what? Let's move nearer to the Lord, and notice him speaking with Ebal and his children. Much shall be revealed there again. We must hear it." Chapter 148. Natural Considerations and Spiritual Significance. In response to the Essenes' suggestion, they all come a little closer to me, and I summon the two Essenes, telling them to pay attention to everything that shall be seen with sunrise, for it shall be most instructive. The two Essenes step up closer to me, saying, "Lord, Lord, that it shall be infinitely instructive is bound to be an eternal truth. But how will our soul be capable of such profound instructions? We certainly gaze upon the brilliant depths of your splendid creations with lustful eyes and exceedingly astonished feelings. Yet we are far too blind to do justice to even the wonders of a dewdrop, comprehendingly, let alone those rising and falling in immeasurable grandeur and distance, luminously upon the firmament. We furthermore have discussed the floating around of the luminous points above the tiny clouds with the disciple Peter, but he could not clarify it to us properly. If it would be alright with you, O Lord, then you might spare us a few words about it. Say I. This means very little and is quite an ordinary thing, similar to the waving of the sea. When you find yourself in the right spot in relation to a moving sea where the broken sunbeams are impacting, then you will see a similar light play. The air for human and animal breathing by no means reaches up to the stars, and no further than about 4 times the height of this mountain from sea level. Beyond such heights, there is a sharp cutoff, such as between water and air, with a water-smooth surface, constantly undulating like the sea. On falling on such said undulating air, sunlight is reflected, as from the water surface. If the air movement is strong, then the occasional refraction is right down to earth, and most easily so when the sun is still below the horizon, when its rays fall as it were unto the air sea from below. And so, these likely seesawing lights are nothing more than reflections of sunlight, their frequency depending on the air undulations. But that they are more prominent right now when the sun appears a mere span below the horizon is because the air waving is increasingly picking up the shining cloud light, producing a kind of dallying to and fro game. Behold, that is the relatively natural explanation of this phenomenon. But beyond that, this phenomenon also has a spiritual significance, and for your comprehension, it is this. Imagine a spiritual sun. The outgoing light from it is absorbed by the continuously waving surface of the created life sea, and this plays with such light, and thereby all kinds of caricatures occur which still let a matte luster radiate from them, however, destroying every trace of the divine primordial form. Thus, the whole heathenism and also Judaism is such a contortion of everything purely divine. However, if you look at a completely quiet water surface, and the sun shines thereupon, it will be reflected from the surface in the same majesty and truth as you can see it at the firmament. In the same manner, it requires a quiet, desire-free heart, which can only be obtained by total abnegation, humility, patience, and purest love, so that the likeness of God in the spirit of man reflects equally pure and true like the earth's sun from a most quiet water surface. If this is the case in a person, everything in him has matured to truth, and his soul is then able to direct its views into the depths of the creations of God, and to view everything in all fullness of the purest truth. However, as soon as it begins to wave in her, the primordial pictures are getting distorted, and the soul necessarily finds herself on the road of deception and half-truths of all kinds and sorts, and cannot reach a clear view until regaining the complete rest in God again. And this is the true Sabbath rest in God, and therefore God has ordered the celebration of the Sabbath. During the Sabbath, man should abstain from every heavy, strenuous work, for every heavy work requires the soul to lend its strength to the flesh, and thereby becomes excited with it, which stirs the mirror of her life water into strong movement, so that she cannot recognize the pure divine truth in herself anymore. The true Sabbath rest, therefore, constitutes in a reasonable celebration from all heavy work. Without an emergency, one should not lay hand on it. However, in need, every person is obliged to help his brother. Even more so than to withhold oneself from all heavy work, every soul should put aside all desires. Since desires are storms of the soul, they disturb the life water, and the likeness of God is torn in the soul, like the image of the sun is torn upon the waves of the sea. Indeed, the image of the sun flashes from the waves. However, in what distortion? And if the storm lasts for long, soon heavy fumes rise from the moving sea and fill the heavenly air of the soul with heavy clouds. They then obstruct the light of the spiritual sun to reach the life waters of the soul, and the soul becomes dark, cannot anymore distinguish true from false, and regards the deceptions of hell as the light of heaven. Such a soul is then as good as lost. There must come strong winds. This means strong trials from above, so to tear apart the evil clouds of the soul, who should then immediately retire to the true Sabbath rest, and thereby bringing to rest her life sea. Otherwise, there is no rescue for her. Behold, this is for everyone the useful spiritual meaning, which this beautiful sunrise shows us in its quite natural appearance. Who shall take note of it in himself, shall remain in truth and all light, and the everlasting life shall become his inheritance. Who, however, shall disregard this teaching and ignore it, shall die forever. Chapter 149, concerning the sunrise and morning phenomena. The Lord. But now continue to pay attention. The sun is just rising its disk, or rather its western half-globe, over the horizon. What do you notice? Say the Essenes. Not much, apart from the bright area rising surprisingly fast from the bright depth. The luminous fish play has now suddenly vanished, whilst the cloudlets are thinning out and also disappearing one by one. And now the entire disk, or ball, is posed above the horizon, and a fairly cold breeze is blowing from the morning, east. But that is all we note. Say I. Cast a glance also down to the earth's plains and valleys, and say what you see. The two Essenes look at the earth's depths, saying, We see the valleys filled with bright grey fogs, whilst the sea surface also is covered with greyish mist. The fog is lifting from the valleys, covering the foothills. Is this too going to have some spiritual significance, perhaps? Say I. Quite certainly, for nothing and without spiritual stimulation, nothing happens on earth. But we want to see what meaning this has. The sun corresponds fully with the being of God. The earth with its valleys, flat areas, hills, mountains, rivers, lakes and sea areas fully correspond with outer man. The fog, which rises between sun and earth, corresponds with the manifold, empty and petty worries of man, which the light of the sun can only sparely penetrate, and the fog rises upwards and even covers the mountains. The hills and mountains correspond with the better comprehension of man on this earth. This better comprehension is likewise clouded by the petty and trifling worries of their half-blind people. Therefore, morning winds are coming and drive the fog from the mountains and fields, so that they cannot be destroyed, and the mountains and fields be freely illuminated and warmed by the sea, so that their fruit of life can become ripe. I think that you are able to understand this correspondence. Say the two Essenes. Yes, Lord, this is as clear as yonder sun. Ah, what a glory in this great holiest doctrine. Oh, how much men are unaware of that they ought to know, the way they know, the way they live. Lord, this doctrine of the true Sabbath rest you have just given us shall be our task to introduce to mankind. This surpasses everything said so far and taught by you, for we see in what preceded it only a preparation for the easier keeping of this holiest doctrine. Verily, all the heavens had to open for returning to men this holiest doctrine of all doctrines. But now quite a different question arises concerning us. How can we properly thank you, O Lord, for this purely superlative, heavenly doctrine? In the depths of our hearts, we feel unworthy of it. Only your grace and love could give it to us. O Lord, do command us on how we should laud and praise you for it. Say I, placing my hands on both Essenes' shoulders. My dear friends, act accordingly, and you shall give me no lesser joy than I now gave you. And your reward shall not be inconsiderable if you spurn mankind unto it.